Having a great day here in the Transformation Leaders podcast and having a great conversation in the area of hyper personalization. So, one of the things that I've noticed is hyper personalization and Gen AI are being talked about together in one breath. Want to start, to you, what is hyper personalization, David?
So, in terms of non-technical, hyper-personalization would be taking information and elements about an individual in a process, whether it's sales or marketing or HR or a whole plethora of things, and taking the data points about that individual, kind of like a persona or a profile, and weaving in that information into whatever it is that you're trying to do to make it more, well, AKA personalized. So an example would be something like, hey, Sean, blah, 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 blah. That's the traditional whatever. That's personalized, but it's not anything about hyper personalization. So take that metadata, put it in context to what it is you're trying to do, and then sprinkle in additional information. So it looks like somebody took the diligence, the time, the effort, the energy to care about having that conversation with you. How about you? What do you think it means?
Well, in this day and age, AI is supposed to provide experiences. And the best type of experiences are ones that are tailored to who you are. Like,
Yep.
You're a Gen Xer. You like to do these hobbies. You live in this geolocation. You like these restaurants. You have loyalty points for this hotel. Every little bit of information about you, besides your name and your date of birth and how old you are, can help tailor the experience. And that is really where I'm seeing retail being the first discussion point when it comes to hyper personalization, because there's so little time that there's so little attention that retailers get to the consumer. They have to put their best foot forward the first time. And this kind of hyper personalization information, which is usually freely given by consumers when they set up their loyalty program, that is what I like to call in the AI world context.
Yeah.
So you could take an AI and you could provide it that hyper personalized context.
Yeah.
And this gives them that quick first best foot forward. Sometimes you don't get that second bite of the apple. This is how retailers can really get in and show the value of their product and guess using AI on why this particular person, not the consumer, the person will be able to consume it. What other industries other than retail do you see this apply, David?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with, when you said retail, but you also said something about the loyalty programs. And so that is absolutely key. So I think anybody listening to this podcast, yeah, easy for me to say, right? The whole idea for folks trying to figure out, okay, where do I start? I'm not in retail. Like, what do I do? The first thing is data enrichment. Go to your CRM system. Go to your source of authority where you keep your customer records. It might even be the accounting system, right? So find out where that is and find out what information you have, and then start strategizing around data enrichment around the profiles of your customers. It could be scraping LinkedIn. It could be scraping Facebook. There's a plethora of third-party services that you could buy stuff from. So that, I think, is going to be a good first step for people listening on how do I get started and how then do I implement it? Because, the old saying is garbage in, garbage out. And so if you don't have a lot of information about your customers other than their name, address, phone number, and email, you're not going to get to that hyper personalization type of category that at least that we're trying to showcase here or discuss today. So other areas of interest could be HR. You onboard people, you got an onboard training manual. Imagine hyper personalizing that manual to an individual. Your welcome letters talks about, hey, listen, here's some things about you. Here's some things about your role. Here's a 30-day onboarding ramp. Here's the areas of our policy and procedure manual that are most germane to your position. You should really focus in on those. Obviously, look at the whole manual because you're a new employee. But the point is, by knowing their job, their role, their expectations, you can kind of kick HR and onboarding up to a whole nother level. And, this goes into so many other things. It's not just outside the walls. It can be used inside the walls too, as well. Hyper-personalization is also good when you're trying to put together teams. So this isn't necessarily HR, but it lends into HR. So lots of consultancy firms, anytime you're looking for adding people to your team, it's interesting to, try to recruit people to join your team. Maybe you're coming up with a new project, large Fortune 100 companies. We'll even include some of the social medias from LinkedIn to could be Facebook or X now. I was almost going to say Twitter, but the point is that they spark up projects all the time. And so, in bringing together a team, the first thing to do is to break the ice with the team and get acclimated and have everybody know who's on your team, and then start having that information about, hey, you guys like to go hiking, you guys like camping and fishing, and you like all this other stuff. And I don't know, you could come up with different types of themes, but the point is having a lot of this information can improve your team building exercises, HR, and just a whole bunch of other things. So that's not necessarily maybe specific industries, but it should be generic enough to apply across every vertical that exists out there, because every company has employees, every company has HR, every company has some sort of projects, and we all know that every company has customers. So you can apply that paradigm from retail and just apply it to your customers, because you're doing marketing already to get the messaging out, whether it's, advertisement, email plays, or whatever it is that you're doing. What are some of the more interesting experiences that you've had in the past where you've seen opportunities to where, this was kind of a dismal failure, or it just fell flat just because there wasn't enough information? And had they applied these scenarios that we're talking about here today, how could that have changed the outcome for the experiences, over the last X number of years that you've been involved in teams that are dealing with trying to onboard either employees or customers, or even your own personal experience to you yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I do notice some people listening in. If you want to post a comment and ask about a use case, we'd love to see it. But to your point in use cases, this is hyper-personalization with AI is not just a retail thing. I completely agree. It is a superpower that you can unlock to provide better experiences. And that's what transformation is about.
Yes.
So when it comes down, maybe it's a patient, not a customer, right? Your
Yep.
point, maybe it's an employee, not a customer. Maybe I've heard a lot of use cases around sales, inside sales, right? Having a better understanding of who your target buyer is, so that you're not wasting the time. Your 5-minute pitch to get them interested, that first bite of the apple on a B2B sales, can be constructed based upon the target company account, based upon their LinkedIn profile, and definitely want to call out for the people who are following, check out David's LinkedIn post about 30, 60, 90 day roadmaps for employee onboarding. Really great conversation. And that's what this podcast is about, is conversation. So, use cases, I think I use this myself, when it comes down to when I am looking, instead of looking at Google Maps and I search for, hey, I'm looking for this kind of shop, I'm looking for that kind of shop, I can provide it more context. I think everybody should understand that AI works better with more context. And that's just what hyper-personalization is all about. The trouble is, and where retailers are really having difficulty, and where, David, I'd like to get your thoughts, is how do we layer in hyper personalization with more of a brick and mortar approach? Because online, I think it's pretty straightforward, just like everybody else.
Yep.
But when you start having a physical presence experience, I think hyper personalization and Gen AI has more challenges. What do you think?
I do agree, and the reason for that is there's a trust mechanism. There's also a consent mechanism. You have a whole convoluted conversation that needs to happen around ethics. And so I think there really needs to be more conversations amongst other vendors, amongst other retailers, even folks like ourselves. We would love to have conversations like that with anybody that's listening, or people like that, to really get to the root of it. So, I've got some ideas. I think they're kind of creepy because, for me to experience that, I would have mixed feelings personally, because while I enjoy the benefits at face value of what I'm about to say, I know that that data and that information could or has the potential to be reused, and or in certain cases could be dangerous in the hands of the wrong people. So, if you think about having that portfolio built up, let's talk about retail. Let's just say I'm going into Tractor Supply store or Home Depot, or whatever it might be, right? Something that I'm interested in. Or maybe it's even a department store. Doesn't matter. Point is, they have my profile. They've trolled my posts. They've followed me because they know I'm a customer, and they keep a history, kind of like an inside history, because those web scrapers are going through and pulling whatever information that I've had. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm in that area in a geo-fenced location, and I have their app on my phone. So all of that perfect storm has to come together, potentially, for this to even work. And so if companies are doing this and they don't have an app, they probably want to get an app. Another quick win that could be a workaround to that is what is called a WPA app, where it's not actually a full-blown app on the machine, but the website can turn into a kind of a makeshift app that can be put on your computer, or on your phone rather, and be made to look like an app. But the point here is that if I know that I'm in the store, or about to enter the store, or I'm driving by the store, and somebody in my profile, there's some correlation between my interest and what's going on, and some sale or some surplus of inventory that maybe they have, that if they don't get rid of that inventory soon, the tax man's going to come along and start charging them more money than they need. So they're like, let's set a rules engine behind the scenes that will say, if I don't get rid of this merchandise that's been sitting here a little bit too long, it's not officially on sale, but through this program, this backdoor type of engineering that's going on, it says the correlation between what somebody likes and needs, plus excessive aged inventory that's coming up for potential taxation. Let's make a quick proposal. Let's give them 50% off. Let's see if they bite. And if that person over time is subjected to those types of things, maybe it backs off to 50%, to 40%, to 30%, and the algorithm learns where is that person's sweet spot. So now not only are they building upon the information that they were able to get publicly, they're also able to find out their personalized buying habits and their tolerance level for discount. That way, discounts can be different for everybody. This is where I said there needs to be this conversation around ethics, because what happens if you and I are best friends and we're in the same car together and we're driving down, maybe we're going to hit the golf course, and all of a sudden we drive by, I don't know, Belk Lindsay or something, and there's dress slacks for work, and we both get the same text. I get a 40% discount and you only get 10. You were like, what? Hey. And then you go, and I want to speak to a manager. How come they got this? And I got this. Well, first of all, maybe the only reason we came in is because we're upset about it. We have no intention about buying it. But you kind of see where I'm going here. This can get real sticky really, really quick. And so, you just kind of have to be really creative at the same time, very ethical. And, as engineers ourselves, guiding and working and talking with customers, every day that we do, we need to continue to have those conversations there with the clients to let them know, hey, listen, yeah, this is all great and fine and cutting edge, but you need to consider these risks or these potential areas of interest for your further conversation with your staff or your senior staff, and figure out where you want to go and how you want to handle that.
Yeah. I think retail grocery stores and the grocery industry has a long history of this. Certainly the e-commerce retailers, the Amazons and Walmarts online, have built upon this concept. So I think for the most part, at least in the States, it's really well defined. For my colleagues out there in EMEA, there's a lot more regulation. So, you have to talk about your mileage may vary on this concept, certainly. But it comes down to, we all know that there is value in customer data. Yes. What their transaction history was, if you have any kind of association to their social media listening is a big thing way before this. So the question comes, and a lot of people are seeing value in Gen AI and data lakes in general. So, how can you squeeze every dollar of value from the data you're keeping? And this is certainly strategies to do that. Yeah. The question really becomes is like, okay, well, how do we get started and how do we do it in a very high governance way? To your point earlier, right? Always recommend anytime you use AI, you need to have the business control AI, not the other way around, because you can
don't
get
want
into
the tail wagging the dog.
Exactly. So you need to think about it from a customer-centric, a patient-centric, a business-centric, safe approach. Risk is a big thing here, but, there is value here. And with value, there's either, three camps. There's the camp that's like, okay, all in, Sean. Here's everything in the pot. Let's go crazy. And I immediately go with caution there. So when I talk to people, when they're in the all-in mindset, I advocate caution. Now, there's the other side, which is, hey, David, the Terminator's coming and going to kill us all, right? And that's the high-risk people. And I say, wait a minute, Gen AI is statistics, not intelligence.
Yes.
Artificial
an algorithm
intelligence,
at best.
Artificial intelligence is not the best name for some of these things. It is much more math than science fiction horror. I recommend obviously the middle approach. Like, why don't you try something, measure it out, and from a business perspective, if the juice is worth the squeeze, you create a bigger juicer and just keep going.
This is true.
So that would be my recommendation. What do you think about getting started? Like, hey, great idea, guys. Transformation is what we're about.
Yep.
How do we eat that elephant that is creating Gen AI hyper-personalized experiences?
Yeah, so I think, to answer the question, I think I touched base a little bit about it earlier. And I think it really comes down to making sure you have the data to support some sort of hyper-personalization. Something that I may add, that kind of, as I was thinking of this, as you were talking right there, is that maybe there's an opportunity to, especially LinkedIn is a really great place. So I always, when we work with salespeople, we always hear that, there's always pressure to bring in new logos, to talk to new companies, to, onboard different experiences and different projects and stuff like that. But by, leveraging, like we do as humans, the related links that we find. Who knows who are they, first, second, third tier, whatever. There's a lot of tools, but this goes back to the other story of how good is your spider? How good can you, deal with LinkedIn and their API, not trip all the tripwires, do ethical type of enrichments without, turning loose a bot of armies out on LinkedIn to crash the network, which then kind of puts you in an unethical place. So, there's all kinds of balances there. So first, you have to have the technical chops and the team to be able to do that. And then secondly, even if you do, the ethical implications for that. And then the strategy or strategic pieces of it, knowing how to get the right data, knowing how to get the enrichment. And more importantly, I think you need to sit down with your board, your executive leadership, your teams. What information, if we had, could be helpful? Or what are our objectives? And if we had information and we turned our customers also into salespeople, how could we do that? And that goes to the, I forget what the expression or the term is. There's like N degrees or 3 degrees of separation from anybody that you need to
Kevin Bacon.
know. Yeah, there you go. And, it really comes down to that is who you know and what you know. And it really is all about making sure that you have that data there. I think that once you get that first hurdle overcome, and that's a lot, right? But then you need to start executing. And now what do you do for the execution? So now your teams need to work with generative AI. And unfortunately, all roads lead back to prompt engineering. And that's one of the things that, we'll show a little bit of a demo later today in just a few minutes about that. But, having the right context, having the right setup, and then making sure, again, that the data is there to support all of this will kind of help tell the story. So I think we can kind of jump the gun in assuming that everybody's gone through the first stage, and then we can move into like the second stage. And again, I can demo that in a few minutes for what we want to show there. But I think as a larger conversation, if you're a CEO or you're a CIO, meaning in control of the company and or its operational data or technical, what are some of the good first high-level conversations that they should be asking internally as well as potentially? I know in certain businesses they're friendly with competitors, and there's even roundtables to where certain industries get together and meet. So what are some questions that these types of folks should be having in preparation to making sure that they can get to the next step? And how can they work together?
Obviously, people don't want to kill off their golden goose, right? They've got revenue coming in. They want to preserve that. They want to figure out how to do something that is additive, at least in the beginning. You don't want to disrupt your revenue cycle, with new technology. What you want to do is add to it. So I always recommend, look at the additive experience. How can you create a hyper-personalized AI experience that will give you the metrics you're looking for? Engagement, experience, positive CSAT scores, these kind of things. And, loyalty, as we talked about, great place. You can create that X new tier, right? The black card, if you will, of whatever services you offer, and then add them, a concierge service, right? And, have the most loyal, the most profitable consumers that you have interact with this
schedule.
Exactly. And then, so first of all, you're not going to have to scale to your entire customer base. You're getting, the best possible answers and best possible feedback. They feel like they've been let under the velvet rope so that they think that they're special. Even if it's a horrible experience, they feel like, hey, they're letting me involved. They care about what I think. These are all great places to start. Before I get too much down to a tangent, I want to thank everybody for their engagement. one of the use cases people mentioned was theme parks. So, definitely a great example of that. I know I've been to Disney, and then they've got their Genie Plus thing, but I can tell you that that experience felt no personalization, let alone hyper personalization. When I know I go to your occasional fast food restaurant, I walk in there and they have my loyalty information, and really they don't know. I can tell you, Kroger, as a loyalty member of them, they provide, hey, this is what you've been ordering before. So they make a quick pick list. So there are people out there that are applying this, and they're applying it and making value from it today. But I would say the majority of people, theme parks included, really haven't figured this hyper personalization thing out. I think, Gen AI and hyper personalization as of July 2024, when we're recording this, I don't think the majority of the industry really, really have a grasp on what is possible, let alone actually in consumers' hands right now. So, again, please call out use cases. We'd be happy to talk to them, and then certainly want to make a call out to the people who are on the call right now. If you have topics that you want us to talk about, we'd love to hear them as well. But want to get back to David. I talked about it earlier. You talked about it earlier. This is something that everybody can play with right now, right?
Yep.
And there's GPT clients. You throw a rock and you hit 15 of them right now. You're going to show one that we like using because it has more governance and more control over it. But do you want to take us through a couple concepts and prompting and what people can do right during this podcast they can pull up and play around with?
Yeah. So if you go to processsentinel.com, you'll come to this landing page and you'll get a lot of the information. And I'm going to walk you through the actual app too, because I have it up here for us to play with. But nonetheless, you can go down here, you can download the app. I have an installation video for you, and just take note of some extra features that were added that unfortunately wasn't recorded in the video. This is for you guys to self-serve. This is just a POC concept type of thing. If you can use it, great. I'm going to show you how it kind of works. But again, this is just an accelerated type of thing for you to get your appetite whet, kind of see what's going on, and be able to bring forth potentially a GPT-like experience for your customers with a twist. And I'm going to show you the twist here. As a quick sidebar, Sean had mentioned an article that I had mentioned earlier. So if you go up there on my profile on LinkedIn and you just search for this article that I've done, it's just implementing a 90-day onboarding path. You just go ahead and search through that. Talks about the 90-day plan. You got the first 30 days, the next 30 days, and so on and so forth. But in any event, that's the article that Sean was talking about earlier. And again, it's called Implementing a 90-day Onboarding Plan. All right, so there's that. Now, with all of that being said, I kind of want to give you the whirlwind tour of this particular interface. This is set up behind the scenes to work with both OpenAI directly and Azure's implementation of it as well, called Azure OpenAI. And in addition to that, just to kind of set the stage, this is using the Microsoft Power Platform. This is not the free version of it that comes with your typical Office 365 licenses. We are using custom connectors to talk to OpenAI, as well as custom connectors to work with Azure's OpenAI. So they will require the premium connector. So again, this is built in Microsoft Canvas Power Apps. And here is a menu that you can see over here on the side. We are at the home page right now. I've got some examples for planting some seeds early on. I'll go over here real quick. So we have four different use cases for you to explore. This is an expense use case. We have a PTO request use case, a price override use case. Maybe you need a discount on something you're selling within your organization. And then, of course, we have a new hire type of use case here. Now, the way that this is and the way this is basically set up, a lot of this is hard coded. And we're using either what's called single shot or multi-shot examples or instructions of saying, here's the expectation, here's what I think you need to evaluate, and here's what we want for an outcome. That way we get a lot of consistency. There's this really geeky term called determinism or deterministic. And by nature, by and large, a lot of this is non-deterministic, meaning you're not going to get an identical, repeatable, cookie cut template again and again. It'll be close, but just like a human, if we were to redo this podcast again tomorrow, verbatim, it'll not be in the transcript, word for word. High area will be similar and very, very close, if not identical in that regards for context, but how it unfolds is going to be somewhat organic. And that's kind of how AI can be. And that's how we do, or we fix the trick, so to speak, by providing these one-shot or multi-shot examples. Then it does have a pretty good chance of giving you an 80 to 90% accuracy on that. All right, so if we just click this at face value, this is the lead-in follow-up. I'll just hit go, and it's basically giving you a rules engine for an expense. And so this is the rule number 1. Then we've got rule number 2, and then we have finally rule number 3. And if I hit go, we get all of those rules, but we have some dummy data sitting here at the top saying, hey, we're going to run this amount is $400. The request is of this date. Here's the due date. And then, of course, we put the rules in place that is there. And so all of that's still there. And if I just go ahead and hit ask, it's going to evaluate the data that's being input. Now, I want you to think about this happening either at your cash register, or maybe it's in your marketing program, or wherever the data comes from. It could just come from anywhere, right? And then you got this rules that's set up, and you use generative AI at a high level to basically try to figure out what should I do as far as, having this into the workflow. And usually approvals take a human being to deal with this. But think of your policy and procedure manuals around all of this stuff. This stuff could be immediately determined based on whatever criteria you give it. Now, in context of what we're talking about today at hyper-personalization, imagine saying, hey, listen, I'm looking to create a marketing campaign across our customers, but here's the demographic that I need to deal with. I want these people of this age, of this caliber that make so much money, or whatever your criteria is. And so it can go through line by line all of your customer enrichment data and determine, hey, which customers are good for this. So not only do you use hyper-personalization in the outreach, but you use it in the analysis and the research phase as well to help you take your pile of data and weed it down to those that are germane for your campaign and your marketing. So think of it just like an AI-assisted filter. Very helpful in that way. But you can see right here, the outcome is pretty much consistent. I threw a bunch of emoji icons in here as well. And of course, we get this.
Gotta love the flavor. I mean,
yeah.
Again, the value here is this kind of English context. Like, so before you had to have a coder to go through and say, okay, if they do this, they do that, they do this, they do that. With generative AI, you get it into an English level rule system. So just because it's rules doesn't mean that that context can't be dynamically created based upon the customer data. Just as you showed here, here is the amount, here's the request, here's the rules. Everything is data from different formats, different sets, and the analysis was done in real time. So it's like two ships passing in the night, and then they line up, and boom, you get intelligence, right? So this is what I'm seeing. And again, Process Sentinel, a great tool, but you could do this on ChatGPT. You could do this on Claude. You can do this on whatever your company supports. If your company doesn't have one, or believes that, hey, you're not allowed to do this, give us a call. We'll help you find a tool that your management would use or would allow to use. But the value of contextualization and hyper personalization is full display here. One question I wanted to ask you, it says profile up at the top, David.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so let me take you to another area of the app. So we'll come back to history and we'll come back to governance in a little bit. But to answer your question right there, let's come over here to profiles. And so here is what we call profiles. And the profile is like the hats that you wear in whatever it is that you do in your role, in your daily whatever. One hat might be you are responding to either support requests or customer requests, and you need to respond to them. So in that case, what you do is you say, instead of, in this example, I'm saying, and this is our example today for hyper-personalization. Let me just focus on this one, and then we'll go and give other use cases. This one says, you're an assistant who implements hyper-personalization. Now, the key part here is that I want it to do something very specific, and I want to guide the instruction. I want to guide the ship. So a lot of times, write your prompts like you're writing it to a 10-year-old, or write it like you're writing it to somebody who doesn't know anything about whatever. The problem is with AI is it's so smart because it's been trained on everything across the internet. It's crippled in mentally speaking because it has the knowledge of everything, but it doesn't really know anything. And without context, it's really stupid. And you're going to get stupid answers and, hallucinations that are like,
Scatterbrain.
wow, maybe we had one too many to drink or something like that, right? So this is an essential part right here, is to define not only who you are, but what it means to be who you are. And it really is talking about, hyper-personalization and defining it. And now I sit there and I give it some more plain English. Now, even though this is a lot to read here, let's make this a little bit more digestible, because there's a wizard called the prompt builder, and we can break this apart a little bit more to help this out. So first you give it a title, and that's the title that shows up over here. You provide the context that I was talking about earlier, and then it's important here to give instructions. So I'm kind of giving a step-by-step walkthrough of what I want it to do, and here's how you should interact with me as the end user for this particular persona or role. So when we switch in the drop down earlier, like I have just a regular helpful assistant over here, and there's nothing there. It just says you're a helpful assistant. It's quite generic. It's what you're going to get with all the GPTs out there. It just says, help me with whatever, right? And so you're playing the gamble. And notice I've got the creativity cranked all the way up. So if you don't want it to give very creative answers, let's just say you have a very serious question. Maybe you're asking a medical question, which I don't suggest you ask a medical question, but if you did, you might want to take the creativity down so that, the makeshift medical knowledge doctor that's there doesn't try to get creative with your diagnosis. You kind of want something a little bit more definitive. So you just kind of crank this down, maybe to there or maybe one. And, just use it sparingly. If you're going to write a story, okay, yes, maybe creative is good. The tokens just says, hey, how much content output should I give you? Should I restrict it in any way? And then the other thing that's helpful is the user role. And so we've got all these multi-select roles that you can pick and choose from. We have a handful of tones. How do you want this tone of this output to be? And so you multi-select any of these. And then the language style is over here. And then finally, we wrap up with some of the response lengths. I typically just leave it as needed because it gives the AI a lot of creative latitude. But if you needed to, say, for example, in X, have a restricted a number of output, you might want to restrict this down and crank your token count all the way down. But now that you've seen kind of that on the outside, and you've seen what we've got here for hyper-personalization, we've got the artist creative on the user role. We've got a handful, 5 of these. We're going to be friendly, inspirational, encouraging, and educational, as well as persuasive, because chances are you're going to use this to try to promote something or to get some sort of call to action happening. And so again, the language style is persuasive. And then the response length is, like I said, is as needed. So if I come over here now and I take this with this profile selected, it's cleaning up my previous abandoned conversation. Let me just go ahead and clear the deck here. And let's do this and let's go. So I'm just going to prompt it by getting started. You saw that really long prompt and you saw that we gave it expectations and step by step. So if the demo gods are working for us, then what'll happen is we'll get a nice warm up here and we've got it. And so all I said is let's get started, and notice how it's prompted me. This isn't, get started doesn't really mean anything, but in context to that prompt behind the scenes that you saw that I built, it's focused on this profile, and this profile is what you see is driving all of this. So it's kind of walking me through step by step. Hey, who am I trying to, or what? And by the way, I have this set up so that when you click on it, it can copy it to the clipboard, so that if you were to click on this, you can get it, copy and paste. So anything you do here is very helpful because you can post it in an email or Word or whatever, but I keep clicking and it's annoying for what I'm trying to do here. But in any event, so it's asking me a couple of things. So Sean, I'm going to ask you to help me be creative here. So under target audience, I'm going to do 1 so that there's a correlation and the AI kind of knows what I'm answering or giving or providing answer to. So for target audience details, who's the target audience? And it's giving me suggestions: age, gender, interest, profession, that kind of stuff.
Let's use the use case they were talking about before. So this is people who go to the theme park. Let's talk about families, right? Let's talk about middle income families, 2.5 children, and they're looking for a wholesome, fun, rememberable adventure in a theme park.
All right. So now for number 2, market outreach. What is the main goal of this campaign? And am I promoting a new product? Am I increasing brand awareness? Am I trying to drive sales? That kind of stuff.
I mean, again, I think the major objective of any theme park is to separate your customers from their wallets. So I would say, we want them to come in and visit the souvenir shops, right? That's the high margin. There's new souvenirs every day. So, there are different souvenirs shops based upon different characters and IP. And there are different tiers of gifts. There's low price, there are high price, and then there's a middle of the road. And again, I want to talk about, he's putting all this information in, and we're inverting this. Hyper-personalization goes both ways, right? You can either engage, as you're seeing here, and collect information and role play. That's what this is called. And I'm sure at one point we'll talk more about role play. But there's also, you can have and make this context by your campaign, applying to the customer information, and then displaying the content for the engagement requirements. So hyper-personalization goes both ways. And we've been talking about both ways interchangeably, and I hope everybody's following along with that. Again, if we're getting too far ahead of our skis, as they like to say, please type in a comment. Me and David kind of sometimes work on shorthand, so want to make sure we're getting this out to understand.
All right, so I just created 3 bullets in tune to what it gave. I just added a third one, just saying I need your creative help. I just gave it permission with that last and third one that it wasn't asking for, so that I can really, really turn it loose on what it is, but it has the context and the constraint to stay in its lane. So it's not going to go off the rails and start talking about, an author creating a book or writing something. All right, so let's just click ask. We're literally playing Russian roulette to see what we get from the AI. So let's see what kind of helpful information it comes back with now that I've provided some information and context. And down here in the lower left corner, you'll see the history of what is being transcribed or transpired here. All right, now here we got the nice big long response. So a couple things we've got here. We said, fantastic, thank you for sharing the details. And so it's got a hyper-personalized marketing strategy that will captivate family and drive fun for your theme park. Here's a plan that leverages the power of hyper-personalization. I'm already excited, right? So it's on track. It's kept focus. First thing item it's giving me, and by the way, all of this right here is in markup. Let me change applications and pop this in. It'll take away some of the what they call markdown formatting, and it allows us to see it more like you would see it in Microsoft Word. So here we got the plan, understanding the audience. Here is the personalized marketing outreach. This is talking about the campaign, a social media campaign. Here's your website personalization. This is a campaign for SMS. Now we've got creative elements about this. It's come up with a theme and some visuals and the tone for that. So this could be handed off to the design team in the marketing office. Now we've got also tracking and optimization. So this is helping people in the background that are IT driven. They're going to know what segments or pieces of information are going to be needed for the analytics. It's encouraging us to do A/B testing to the marketing team. And then it's also looking for that feedback loop to see what those interactions, which could also be construed as closing the loop, building the loop for the next iteration, for the next thing. And so this hyper-personalization and technological prowess of all of these different steps are extremely helpful in coming up with some sort of a plan for hyper-personalization. So again, we came up with a fictitious theme park. You fill in your use case here, whatever it is that you're doing. This is just the big X. You replace X with your need. And so hopefully this was informative and helpful to you on this front.
David, I really like, is it possible for us to tweak a little bit of this and be able to show the difference? So we've personalized one story. Can we go through and just change, let's say, the demographics? We want everything the same, other than, can we say it is grandparents looking to have their bucket list, right?
So we want to address who? Grandpa?
Yep. Change the demographics so that it is grandparents who are trying to do their bucket list, right? So you can't ask for a more different audience, right? For grandparents who are going themselves to do a bucket list travel adventure, compared to mom and dad creating that memory that will last forever for their children, right? And see, you could tell he's just typing in English. I mean, literally, you can add a button in here that can transcribe, and you could just talk to it. Right? A lot of the tools out there, calling you out, Google Gemini, you could just hit a button and talk to it, and then it will transcribe. So making role playing so much easier. Now, David, where do you see the difference between, what we're doing here and your typical content generation for Gen AI? Do you see a difference between those two use cases.
Ask me the question one more time because I can't chew bubblegum and talk. I was too busy focusing on that. And I heard you talk and I was trying to grab it, but I lost you at the last second because my brain went bzzz.
I'm sure you're like me and you were thinking about the fireworks tomorrow.
Or what's going to happen after I hit the S button.
The question is, how is what we're doing here different from your typical Gen AI content creation use case?
I think there's a lot of similarities, but this is where the confusion comes in with generative AI. People think, it's just, I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to get a response. They don't realize the power of what this can do. So not only am I asking it for essentially a marketing program and a marketing plan, leveraging hyper-personalization, and then taking the plan, ripping out the feet from underneath it, giving it a new demographic to chew on and rework the plan. It's weaved itself into, again, this is the main message that I always tell everybody: build it into your workflow. Make this human-centric tool. Again, that's the key, not to have AI replace your people, but use this as a tool to launch what's going on. So if I'm the director of marketing, or if I'm the CMO, or I'm, executive management, I'm going to use a tool like this. And then I'm going to use all of the steps here, and I'm going to meet either one-on-one, or first I'm going to have a high-level meeting with the team, and I'm going to say, here's what you need to do. And then one-on-one to say, let's get down into the trench, have a litmus test, have everybody check all of the different pieces, and go forth with that. So before we run out of time, let's see how well.
Yes, absolutely. And while that's still cooking, want to remind everybody, every Wednesday, but not next week, we have this podcast. So keep an eye out on our LinkedIn feeds, on our Twitter feeds, on X feeds, and all of our social media outlets, as well as our website. And really appreciate everybody's engagement this week, last week. Looking to hear more from you all. David, what do you see that's different here?
I'd see everything different, and it's really reworked the entire thing. So it's, first of all, the email campaign alone. If you look at the subject line, create timeless memories with your grandchildren this summer, it's really taken and latched a hold of that theme. It's reworked the entire plan accordingly. It understands the demographic. I did not say age 60 and above, so contextually, it already knew who it was looking at. And if we look down the list, you can see this is all about memories and cherishing and touching and, really family bonding, make you really feel good about what's going on. So, hey, if you're watching this from a theme park, this is a great idea. So go ahead.
So I just want to kind of review before we run out of time, David. So we talked about personalization, hyper-personalization, Gen AI, how they work together, retail. We talked about process Sentinel, how you can do this manually so that you can understand the concept. But this can fit into any architecture, right? Yep. This is certainly, to your point, a human in the loop concept. If you wanted to embed this into an AI assistant right in front of the consumer, you'd have to put a ton of governance in front of it, but that's possible. What we really want to talk about in this podcast is about transformation and the technology that can be applied to do that. And I really see that hyper-personalization, generative AI, is a hidden superpower people aren't yet aware of that they have at their fingertips. So really appreciate, David, your time today going through all this. And I hope our audience really appreciated some of the insights that we've put here. If not, let us know. I mean, we're always interested in hearing what the audience has to say on this. So please be engaged, and look out for our next podcast coming in next week or the week after, somewhere around there.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, David.